Hi, I'm Chris here at HiFi Buys in our Beatles room, which I can't seem to get out of. And I'm here with David.
Hi, I'm David.
And today we're going to talk about HRS, which is something that kind of go sort of unnoticed by a lot of people when they come into the store, but perform a really incredibly important function in putting together a great hi-fi system. It's something that I personally don't know a lot about, so that's why we've got David here to really help share his knowledge, and hopefully I'll learn something along with you today. All right, so I think probably the best way for us to jump into this is for me to kind of let you know where my understanding stands, and then maybe you can help me sort of fill in the gaps and expand on that. So to my understanding, really, everything they make is about reducing vibrations, and by doing that, reducing the noise floor of your entire system. The most obvious thing, at least to me, and the part that I understand the most, is obviously we want to keep vibration away from our turntable needle so that it doesn't pick up that external vibration as part of the signal and just adds noise to it, right? Covering up the detail. The part that I don't really have a great grasp of is what all the other components do, right? Why our phono preamps and why our streamers benefit from the same stuff that the turntable does. And then the other side of it, what the damping plates and the different feet that they make, what those are really doing. That's kind of where the gap in my knowledge certainly lies.
Actually, what we're solving when we try to implement HRS products into a system is that there's energy in a room like this when we're playing music, and that energy is in the form of vibrations. We all know what happens when we have too much energy or vibration in a turntable situation. We've heard it cause feedback where we've had to run to turn the volume control down. But energy and vibrations cause other problems in all other components too. So when we tap on something, we can actually hear it, usually in the system. And that's because that energy and vibration has been transferred through to the components and gets amplified. Because every little piece and part inside of even these very expensive components has a resonant frequency that can be excited by a certain vibrational frequency that matches that. When it hits that frequency, just like when you hear a piece of metal start to vibrate from a frequency of a subwoofer in a car and the panels are vibrating, that metal's hit its resonant frequency from some sound coming out of that subwoofer.
Right.
That happens in these components, only at a very, very, very small level. What is that a problem for? It obscures that level of detail that we're always trying to turn our volume up for to hear. You know, men especially are guilty of turning their stereos up too loudly to hear detail, and it's because they're trying to hear into that level of noise and get that detail that's obscured by
the signal
of
the noise floor, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and so what we're talking about is, rather than turning the volume up, just lowering the noise floor.
Absolutely, he's got it. I think when HRS first came out, and they would make a claim that you could reduce your noise floor by up to 23 dB. And that's pretty significant.
Yeah.
And I think Alan, when he first heard that, didn't believe it. But Alan's not one to spend money on something that he doesn't think's necessary.
Absolutely.
And I think he didn't think it was necessary when he first heard about it. But Mike Latvis was at Expona one year when it was here in Atlanta, and he talked to Alan, and Alan wasn't very receptive, but Mike said, well, why don't I bring it out to your store and set it up? Alan was a disbeliever until he started putting each one of his components on an HRS rack system. Alan knew what his system sounded like before that and knew what it sounded like after, and he was just totally convinced.
Yeah.
I mean, he supposedly wrote him at least a 5-figure check.
On the spot.
On the spot to buy the stuff.
Yeah.
And that was before
Chris
and I were there.
Right,
but we've heard the story over and over again. And I kind of felt the same way when I took it home. I had my stuff on a fairly inexpensive Sanus glass rack. I had pretty decent equipment, and I just didn't realize how much it was missing of what its performance could be until I got rid of that glass Sanus rack and put all my equipment on an HRS rack. And it was like, oh my God.
Yeah.
I mean, night and day. And I didn't realize it was going to have that big of an impact. I didn't realize really how good my system was. I was like, wow, I wish, just like I was watching Emily today say in one of her videos that their biggest kick they get is when a customer calls back and says, I wish I would have done this 20 years ago.
Right.
It was such an improvement. There is detail in well-recorded recordings that you've probably been missing. And it's just like little sounds pop out of your speakers and appear in places that don't seem like they're coming out of your speakers that you didn't hear before. And it's like layering of the soundstage front to back, and then the width of your speakers seems to have opened up and it goes beyond your walls. So those are things we all look for, and those are little sonic cues that were being obscured in the background noise level that now, when that was lowered, we're able to pop out and just surprise you about how good your system could sound. I was just amazed that my system had the level of detail it had. Friends heard the difference, and that's always nice too when you know, someone revalidates what you may have confirmation bias over.
right, because you spent the money, right? Yeah. I think the most compelling demonstration that I've seen, at least with this, was we were set up to do an HRS isolation base demo, and I think it was in the Zeppelin room we had it set up. The demonstration was basically turning the stereo up very, very loud until it started to distort because of how much of that vibration was shaking the rack, right? And that vibration obviously getting in the phono cartridge, causing distortion, and then leaving the volume at that level, pausing the music, just picked up the turntable, put an isolation base, and I believe it was even the E1, I think, right?
E1X.
Their least expensive isolation base, put it right under the turntable, turned the music back on, same track, everything, and that distortion and the noise was just gone. It was still very, very loud. And we were still able to then, you know, turn up the preamp, I think like 10 clicks before we even started to hear any more of that. And like by that point, people were like trying to run out of the room. It was so loud. So I think, at least for me, that was, you know, the most direct and compelling sort of demonstration of that external vibration, and, you know, certainly the most obvious form of that being the turntable. And I remember that and tell that story to this day. It is really, especially in this level of a system, such a vital component. So.
And it really does do what it says it does. I mean, we're happy to send these things home with people because they usually don't ever come back.
Almost never, You know, it's a great place to sort of point out that, like, if you go to an audio show, I mean, just about every system that you see will be sitting on an HRS rack, and especially at the high end, right? It's even outside of the manufacturers and components that we carry, it's something that gets requested by those manufacturers trying to put a system together. They want to put their equipment on an HRS rack to really show it off as best that they can.
I think Mike Latvis sometimes sends us emails when they're getting ready for these shows, and I think some shows he's had 3 semi-truck fulls of stuff he's unloaded for other vendors to display their stuff on his rack systems. It's pretty amazing. They are regarded as one of the best in the world. Mike has got some experience that is way above and beyond really what this environment is to design vibration control for. He came from a military and aerospace environment in trying to do vibration control.
Oh, wow.
So whereas we've got a nice cozy room that, you know, is probably going to be somewhere around 70 to 75 degrees, and we listen to vibrations called music that are 20 hertz to 20,000 hertz. He had to control environments that were far more extreme than that. They were temperature-wise more extreme, so polymers reacted differently under different temperatures for trying to control vibration, as well as the frequencies he had to control. Sometimes it was rockets taking off and the vibrations that they have, which can be like 7 hertz or something like that.
So it's way outside the band
this
of what
actually,
we're worried about.
You could almost think of as sort of easy for him.
Right.
But he was an audiophile and was interested in racks that could reduce background noise. And he started looking at what was available, and he said, I can do better than that.
It seems like a lot of the truly incredible products, especially at this level, really come from people that have the know-how from a previous background, but have the personal interest in hi-fi. That sort of marriage between those two always seems to result in really special products.
I don't think he probably ever thought he'd be living full-time off of isolation bases and rack systems, but he's living well off of that. The reason that he went beyond just designing one for himself was that he started playing this system on his racks, and all of his buddies wanted one.
Right.
So he ended up having to produce
pretty good sign that you've done something right
for his audiophile friends.
Yeah.
The E1X is their entry-level isolation base. It can take the 4 different types of feet that they have, depending on the application of it. But it just has a metal piece on the front with the HRS logo. So in a rack system, it looks like all their other isolation bases from the front. What you'll notice though, when you have one, is the sides and the back of it don't have any metal framing on them, and that's the cost savings measure. And the insides of it are more simple. It is a resin impregnated material. When you go to an R series, you start to get a metal frame, but it's 4 pieces put together.
Right. Okay.
By the time you go to the M series, like we have in here, it's a solid ingot of aircraft grade aluminum that they've machined the insides of it out to put in the different constrained layer damping levels. And by the time you get to an M3X, they put a top layer of granite on it so that it has a very, very good wearability factor.
Oh, wow.
And then for frame systems,
yeah,
they have really 3, but you could say 4, because the S series frame that we have here has a variant where you have these cross braces, and they call it an SXR signature frame. But they start with the EXR frame system. That's the one I was able to buy and put into my home and was so impressed with. And then they go to the SXR, which is this without these cross frames. And we've got 2 other SXR racks in our store, as well as 2 EXR racks in our store, so you can see them all. This is an SXR signature. So it has these extra cross braces front and back, and then they go to the VXR. And the VXR is like giant ingots of metal that stack on top of each other instead of poles. We had one here in the store once. It was just a 3-shelf one. It came in a wooden crate, and we rolled it out on the wheels it was on, and it was just like rolling a vault around. It had so much mass to it. It's just incredibly massive, and it has adjustable shelf heights, which is kind of unique to that rack system. All their other ones, you have different pole heights, but the VXR actually has different places where you can adjust the shelf to. You don't have to replace your poles to change your shelf height. You can just change the shelf height inside the VXR rack.
Well, I mean, and that's one of the, I guess, interesting things that I have picked up, especially on the EXR. You know, essentially the shelves are, I mean, a vital component of it, because they are structurally
part of the
rack, right? And so they're physically attached to the stands, right?
It's the only rack system from them that you don't have to buy isolation bases on to start out using it. You can buy it as is, and it's got E1X isolation bases built into it.
Just without the feet.
Without the feet.
Right? Yeah.
So it doesn't have that shock absorber type function to it, but the structural rigidity of the rack and of the isolation bases themselves, it's a huge improvement over anything anybody's using.
And so I guess that also allows, if you wanted to upgrade down the road from an EXR to, say, an SXR bases.
You can reuse those bases, you add feet to them, and you can reuse the poles. You just have to have different
like connector pieces
that the poles go into.
Cool.
The only thing you don't reuse is those connector pieces. You have to buy new ones. So you get to use about 80% of your EXR to create your new SXR.
Wow.
And then if you want to up your SXR, you can take it to a signature by adding the cross braces. And then for chassis noise reduction, the least expensive things they have are the Nimbus assemblies. And
so those are essentially
they're Nimbus spacer with a Nimbus like coupler on top and the bottom of it.
Got it.
So the aluminum is the spacer,
Yeah.
but a Nimbus assembly is a Nimbus spacer plus 2 Nimbus couplers glued onto each side of it.
And so the couplers are it's a absorption material.
And it acts as a constrained layer dampening device, because you've got polymer, and then aluminum. And you put those under sheet metal chassis products. And so those come in different heights, depending on how you want to space your equipment, how high you want it off of the base. After that, for chassis noise reduction underneath, they have a Helix, which is a less expensive version of the Vortex.
Okay.
And then they have this Vortex.
So what's the difference between the Helix and the Vortex, other than cost?
The Helix is made out of like a proprietary material that is not metal like this. It's less expensive to manufacture.
Gotcha.
Then for top chassis noise reduction, you have 2 different size thickness of damping plates. The thicker ones are usually used on heavier metal plate. The thinner ones used on stamped metal. Those stop the actual chassis from vibrating from internal vibrations. There's stuff sometimes inside of here, like transformers, that will have a innate vibration no matter how expensive you made them.
Right.
And it stops that. So when that transformer is maybe a little bit humming and making the chassis vibrate a little bit, that absorbs it into it's essentially a proprietary polymer he's developed that turns it into heat.
Okay. I think we've covered all the products at this point, but I've got a couple questions maybe you can just help me understand. I hear the term constrained layer damping all the time, whether that's actually in speaker cabinet construction, all the time with HRS. Can you give me maybe a short, explain like I'm 5 years old, sort of version of what constrained layer damping is and why it is sort of the chosen method for damping these types of products?
I'll try, at least this is my understanding.
Yeah, sure.
Typically a material, another material, and then a material kind of in a sandwich construction.
Yeah.
Since each one of them has a different resonant frequency,
yeah,
vibration can transfer through one and it will stop everything except its resonant frequency, and then the next layer will stop that one, and then the third one can stop. So it's
that
just,
one's resonant.
That's the way I understand it.
Gotcha, okay. So it's almost like gates, right? I mean, almost, right, is like if something makes it through one filter.
Yeah, think of it as a filter.
Right,
almost,
then there's another filter there to catch that resonant frequency.
The ones that it didn't catch.
That makes a lot of sense. And that also makes some sense in seeing the cross sections of the isolation bases, because at this level, at M3X level, there's a lot more layers of material. One of the things really that stood out to me is just how sturdy and how solid these racks are. I mean, even if we removed all the components from this, it still would take, I don't know, maybe 4 of the biggest guys that we have here in the store to even move this rack completely empty, just inches, right?
Yeah. On their website, actually, Mike Latvis does a really good video of why he thinks their quality control is superior to most other manufacturers of this type of product. He starts out using finite element analysis of these poles, of the different joints, especially like on the VXR rack, the different thicknesses in the different areas, and he shows how they stressed it and they bombarded it with vibrations to see where they needed to design the metal into the shapes that they did. But then all of the people that actually then do the machining, you can see the machine tools they use and how precise they are, as well as all their operational procedures are all in front of the people while they're assembling things. Even if they've been there 12 to 15 years, they don't do things by memory, they do things by operational procedure. They look at everything and they make sure that things are checked and double checked. So they have a level of quality control that I haven't seen in any manufacturer like this before, and I have sold other rack systems that are in this price range that don't compete with the quality level that Mike achieves with these. Most of his employees have been there a very, very long time, and they all take it very, very seriously, and their biggest reward is when they have that customer call them back and say, I can't believe how good my system sounds now. I didn't realize my components were this good until I placed them on your equipment.
All right, well, I certainly have learned a lot, so thank you for taking the time and for sitting in here with me, David. I really appreciate it, and thank you for sharing all the knowledge that you've got and your experience with their products. I really appreciate that. So.
Very welcome.
Yeah.
We love this product set, and we love to let people try it out at home and prove it to themselves.
Yeah, so if you want to hear it for yourself, please come on down to HiFi Buys. We're in Buckhead in Atlanta. We can show you this stuff here in the store. Like I said, we're set up to be able to demonstrate the difference that these products can make here in the store. But really, the way to know for sure is to take something home and try it for yourself. And we'd love to set you up with something like that over the weekend. So come on down and see us, and we'll see you then.
And thanks for watching.
Yeah, thanks for watching.